Welcome to In Focus. I'm your host, Enrique Medina, and today we have Maria Cominis. She is currently a professor at the College of Performing Arts here at Cal State Fullerton. In addition to teaching, Maria is a working actor and playwright and has appeared in numerous television shows such as Desperate Housewives, One Life to Live, All My Children, and the hit Fox sitcom New Girl. Without further ado, Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Enrique. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. First thing I wanted to ask you, as far as your journey, where did it all start? And tell me a little bit about like the inspiration that went into that.
To become an actor?
Exactly.
Well, I was the kid that would run around with the tablecloth on my head and pretend to be Maria Von Trapp from The Sound of Music. And my siblings, my older siblings, or my half-siblings, would kind of mock me and laugh at me. And the Greek side of the family would like ramble off in Greek and go, oh, Maria είναι theatrina. And then they roll their eyes and I went, oh, so that means I'm an actress. So I sort of like, as a kid, kind of fell into that, I don't know, creative space of just, you know, finding my imagination and finding that inner joy and that childlike play. And I always did. I always sort of had that. And you know, then when you decide to make a career out of it, then your parents have an opinion about that. But yeah, that's how it all started, from just child play and that inner child of just joy and imagination, and yeah.
That's awesome. I know we talked about that you've been a part of some different shows in the past, some shows on ABC and Fox. Can you tell us how that was like and just kind of run us through just how it is?
Working on television shows? Yeah, I mean, on Desperate Housewives, I was sort of a recurring small role, and then it evolved into a guest star recurring, and that was fun because it kind of developed my character from, you know, what I did, and that was great. And yeah, and I not too long, but I think it was right as we started to open up from COVID, I did an episode of Hacks, small role. So it's great. It's fun to stay in it, and I find whenever I'm working as an actor, my students just sit up and listen a little bit more. So yeah, I treasure those moments of working, and hopefully now that the strike is over, that we can all sort of get back to work.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to ask, as far as, because you've worked both as an actor in television shows and also in plays, right? What's kind of the difference in working in both?
Acting on television is much more internal. It's really a thought. It's in inner life, and although, yeah, it's physical too, but theater is really, the storytelling comes from the physicality and definitely in your body. Your spine sort of tells the story too about who you are. So it's much more physical. I don't like to use the word big and small because it's sort of, that's general, but good acting is good acting, and truth is truth. So it just depends on the genre and the story you're telling and the character who you're playing and what their world is. But generally, I would just say the simple definition is that television and film is just much more of an internal work, an inner life, an inner access of depth. But that's not to say it's not physical and broad, you know, too. So, yeah.
Of course. Another thing I wanted to ask, as far as your journey here to Cal State Fullerton, tell us a little bit about what it is that brought you here to teach here.
Well, I went to Cal State Long Beach, and all my friends went to Cal State Fullerton and for my undergrad. Wow. And I always knew that they had a great musical theater program, and I was doing musical theater at the time, but I was sort of in the wrong school, so I thought. But it turns out that I was in the right school. And I was studying acting, and I was performing with a song and dance group as well. So I felt like staying at Cal State Fullerton was, you know, or staying at Cal State Long Beach was sort of the right choice for me, although I kind of felt drawn. So I went to New York, was there for 10 years, and somewhere along the lines, I had already gotten my MFA from UCI, and I was like, my husband and I were like, well, we either move to New Jersey or we moved back to California. We had a toddler and it was 9/11, and so that's when I started looking for professor, a position at tenure track. And so then Cal State Fullerton had a position. I didn't get it the first time, but I got some other adjunct positions. So we moved on those. I started there, and then I was sort of doing the adjunct dance on the freeway all over Southern California, and then Cal State Fullerton had another post, and that one I got. So
Nice.
Here I am 19 years later.
That's awesome. You
Yeah.
talk about the MFA that you got at UCI and then
Yeah.
eventually moving to New York. How
Yeah.
was that like?
Well, I chose UCI for that reason. They had a New York satellite program, and I ended up getting my degree in drama with an emphasis in musical theater. But I also was, an actor, and not just musical theater. So I found success in both. And so we had this satellite program where we studied with Uta Hagen. We studied with Broadway dance choreographers and coaches, and so it seemed like the logical place for me to go. And I wasn't quite ready to move to New York yet. And my husband, I was married at the time when I went to grad school, and he wanted to do the BMI Lehman Engel musical theater workshop. He's a composer, now he's a music producer for Disney Entertainment. So we went on a wing and a prayer to New York, and after my third year of grad school, and I had already sort of established a relationship with Uta Hagen, a famous acting teacher who wrote Respect for Acting and Challenge for the Actor. And so we had a connection, and then when I ended up moving there, I studied, and then I actually taught at HB Studio about a couple years after I moved there. So that was that's why I chose UCI for the New York program, and it ended up being the right place for me to transition to New York.
Awesome.
So,
And
yeah.
as far as the entertainment industry in general, as far as differences with California and New York, what would you say those differences are?
That's a really good
yeah.
question. There is a big difference. I think when I came back from New York, I had a lot of New York in me, and I think it was a little bit like, for California kids. I think I still have some of that, but I've kind of couched it with my California, I was born and raised here and spent 10 years in New York. But I think it's not necessarily talent. Maybe it's more of a philosophy of just grit. I think New York actors have to fight to get to an audition, meaning like the city is a hard city to navigate, It's hard to
Right.
afford, it's hard to, you schlep, you're not in your little nice car driving on the freeway. And so it's harder. And so it definitely builds a certain amount of grit, and you need a certain amount of moxie, a certain amount of passion and determination in New York, and California is a little bit laid back. So that definitely influences the kind of actor you are, I think, a little bit. Not that neither one is bad or good or better than the other, it's just different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, specific play that you wrote, we were talking about it a little bit before, The Woman of Zalongo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly
that's
again.
okay.
It was a semifinalist in both the Eugene O'Neill National Playwrights Conference and Bay Area Playwrights Festival. What's the play about, and what exactly inspired you to write it?
Yeah, and we also got a National Endowment of the Arts grant to do it here, and we did it last March.
incredible.
And so that was through Cal State Fullerton, which I'm really proud of, because we applied the first time and we didn't get it, and then we resubmitted and we got it. So I was very grateful to the Grants Office of Grants and Research. They were amazing mentors there. And so what is it about? Well, it was inspired by my grandmother's childhood in Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul. And she was a child of war during the First Balkan War, 1912, 1913. And she wrote about her childhood and being a child of war, and not in a way where it was like historical facts. It was more from a child's perspective. And it was very powerful. And some of the things that she wrote about were like chilling. Like one of the lines that sort of drove me was she wrote, in the streets, they're talking about slaughtering us like lambs. I wondered what it felt like to be slaughtered like a lamb. I mean, and I was younger when I read these things. And then as I got older, I just sort of put them aside, and I thought, I'm going to do something with that someday. And one of the other ones that was really a driving force in her writing was, there will always be forces that seek to destroy the fundamentals of our freedom. And that's sort of what was the catalyst to get me writing and sort of telling her story about how it is informed in today's how is it relevant today in our world. And so then I was at a Greek festival. I go to them often with my family, and I was dancing, and there was this dance that was sort of, I had an outer body experience, and I grabbed the woman who was leading, and I said, what is this dance? And she explained to me about the women who, and I'm just going to offer this up for listeners if they want to pause. I'm going to mention something about self-harm, so if they need to pause, they can, and resume later. But these women were trapped, again, by the Ottomans. This was like 100 years prior to my grandmother's experience. And the Ottomans trapped them, and they, instead of choosing a life of enslavement, they believed in the afterlife, freedom in the afterlife. So they took their children and jumped off the cliff, hoping that there was freedom. And some survived by falling upon their kin, their mothers, their sisters, and some, like few, survived to tell their story. And so I went, okay, wait a minute. This happened in 1803. It happened to my grandmother in 1912 or 1913, or she witnessed, oppression and violence to women. And so obviously we're dealing with women seeking their own autonomy, losing, their own civil rights. And so I felt like this was definitely something, it was a puzzle piece to put together. It was a very complex play for my first full-length play. I had written for many years, but nothing, I work on plays all the time, so I think I'm a good critic of myself. I'm pretty critical. And so then I realized, along with people that support me, like, there's something here. So it took me a long time, but that was the initial inspiration, Mayaya and the women of Suli, and then also what was happening in 2016 and now, and so it's an ongoing fight for women to sustain their freedoms and autonomy.
Right. And look, we talked about the inspiration, and I feel like you kind of touched up upon it a little bit there at the end, but what kind of message do you want to relay to your audiences with this play in particular?
Well, what's interesting is we had Dr. Aitana's Spanish Civil War students come see the play, and they read the play. We did a little collaboration, an interdisciplinary collaboration with them, and they read the play, and then they came to see the play. And one of the things in their responses is so moving to me, and I was like, they put it so beautifully, and not just one, but a few of them. They said that women really are the soldiers of the world, and I thought, yeah, we're marching on for our freedom. And in the play, young Eleni, who is the lead character, who is the grandmother, who's really my grandmother. She's always told, like, fight like hold your head up like a soldier, walk like a soldier, Eleni, proud, strong, And so the students actually really put it more beautifully than I could ever put it, but that was really moving to me. Yeah. Awesome.
One thing I also wanted to touch upon, I know you've kind of mentioned it in some of the answers as well, your Greek heritage. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe how it's influenced you throughout your career?
Well, yes, it's interesting. I'm first generation on my dad's side. My dad was from Greece. He didn't come to this country till he was 30. And my mother is first generation from her parents from Turkey, Greeks. And it's just interesting how I didn't have representation in the work I wanted to do, right? And that's sort of why I started writing. I was looking for material for myself. But more importantly, I think I was really curious about my heritage because my dad was not, he wasn't forthcoming in a lot of stories. Like, he didn't tell me his ancestry. And he died when I was 19. I was a sophomore in college. So I think a lot of my curiosity came from, who am I? And what is this Greek heritage? And, after your grandparents, after the culture sort of dies away, when your grandparents die and your father who's from Greece is gone, like, we became very Americanized. And he never wanted to teach me Greek, yet he was a Greek language teacher in the Greek church, for many years when I was growing up, but he did not want me to learn Greek. So now as an adult, I'm struggling to learn Greek for the last, many years. It's harder to learn when you're older, but
definitely.
But it did influence my writing in that it made me curious about who I am and where I come from, and And I do, like you were asking me off camera, like have I been to Greece? And I go as often as I can, and I still have family there. And it definitely, when I'm there, I am connected deeply to who I am, you know, in my heritage.
Awesome. I know we touched up upon it a little bit earlier, but kind of curious, as far as your performances themselves on a camera, doing things for TV shows or doing things for plays, do you have a preference? If not, what's kind of like, what brings out that inner child for you for both of them?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I love doing both. I think in theater you have at least I have a little bit more range.
Okay.
I think in television they tend to kind of pigeonhole more, and theater gives us more opportunity. But I think it's changing, and I think, you know, for me, like I look at, you know, maybe the best is yet to come. Like maybe, you know, the roles or whatever that I played a lot of musical theater roles in my 20s and early 30s, and you know, and those were fun. But I think as we get older, like I think there's more opportunity to really sink your teeth into roles that have more depth and more range. And I think it can be found on either television or film or theater. So I don't really have a preference, but I think I'm a theater-trained actor. That comes first, but not really a preference. Yeah.
Awesome. As far as advice that you would give to any sort of student or young person who wants to get involved in this industry at this point with all the experience that you've had, what type of advice would you give that person?
Well, you have to really love it. You have to like love it to the point where even if you're tired, you're not thinking about not going. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's not even a question. Like you have this drive and this desire and this what the Greeks call kefi, right? It's like this inner passion, this inner light that just keeps you marching, you know? And even if you're exhausted, right? But I think also too to listen to their gut. Like, what is it that your inner voice is telling you? Yes, parents say, oh, pick something that's, you know, stable. And yes, you should do that too. But if you really feel in your inside that this is your calling, then follow it. And all that other noise will go away when you're on your right path. And work with love and generosity and joy.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I think that's a piece of advice that we all could take away, regardless of the field.
True.
Last thing I wanted to ask before we wrap this up,
Yeah.
as far as your next steps, I know you're doing things here at Cal State Fullerton and also professionally. What are the next steps? What's it looking like?
Well, there's a lot on the burner. We're still moving forward with Women of Zalongo. We'll see what happens with that, but that's moving forward. I just finished, well, I kind of sort of finished my first draft of my next play.
Awesome.
And that, it's not quite finished, but I did give it to, you know, a few trusted people to kind of give me feedback. So that's happening. And the strike is over, so hopefully, you know, working again and working on television and, you know, and teaching and that's, I mean, just keeping creative and continue, you know, working and doing what I'm doing. But you know, I think there's really important to stay, things keep moving and work begets work and projects beget other projects. And that's how we network and find our like-minded collaborators and who we thrive and who we want to work with, you know. And so, yeah, so I'm listening, you know, whatever the universe has next, I follow, you know.
Awesome. I love
Yeah.
that, Maria. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
coming on the
you.
show.
It was a joy, Enrique.
We're lucky to have you here on campus, Maria. And
Thanks.
thank you for joining us, as I mentioned, to discuss a little bit more of your play, Women of Zalongo. And we also want to thank you for joining us in the studio here today. We wish you nothing but success in your future going forward. And until next time, I'm Enrique Medina. This has been In Focus.